Hi, Harry Dent here. You know what the latest thing is? Now Trump is going to have bigger tax cuts, more tax cuts before the 2018 congressional elections. I mean, where does this end? How desperate do you have to get? As I said in an Economy and Markets article here recently, if you put your kids on training wheels and 3 years later they're still on them, you know something is wrong. Well, we're now over 9 years into nonstop, unprecedented stimulus. I mean, it started in very early 2009 with, $1 trillion right off the bat in Fed stimulus, and then, of course, other central banks around the world to keep the economy from imploding after the 2008 meltdown. Why did we have that meltdown? Because every time you have a major debt bubble, like we had, you have a meltdown when there's deleveraging and debt has to be written off or canceled. And asset bubbles, stocks, real estate, commodities, whatever is bubbling has to deleverage and come down to earth. That destroys money. That causes bank failures. That causes business failures. It's a natural process. It's a clean out. It cleans out the economy. And this only happens once in a lifetime. We've been saying this for many, many, many years. And it's just a fact of life. And not just in the economy and markets, but in everything. This happens when people get sick, if they get overly toxic for whatever reason. They may get cancer or get an extended cold or something. And that's just the body cleaning out stuff, excesses you don't need. Well, we stopped this. Central banks have had the arrogance, outright arrogance, I call it, of saying we don't trust the economy's natural mechanisms that it's developed over centuries and centuries and even thousands of years for growing and healing itself and booming and busting. And anybody thinks you can have a boom without a bust just doesn't understand life whatsoever. And that's frankly the way economists think. Their number one goal is to never have a recession again, only grow. Well, that pisses me off as much as doctors who say, oh, we've got to cure the common cold. Somebody who says that to me, a doctor says that to me, has just lost credibility because it means you don't understand. Colds are there to keep you healthy. Colds come now and then. Again, when we get imbalanced in some way, overly toxic or exposed to extreme weather or stress or whatever, you build up excesses and the body takes a few days to get rid of them. That's what a recession's like. Get rid of excess capacity. Get rid of bad loans, bad, inefficient companies. Get people sober again, basically, after a binge. And that's why we've had the greatest boom and debt bubble in all of history. There is no comparison, not just in the size of the bubble, but it's global in extent. And in financial assets, we've had a bubble in everything. Commodities that peaked in 2008, stocks, real estate, in emerging countries, developed countries. There's nothing that didn't bubble. Bonds, treasury bonds, corporate bonds, junk bonds, everything has bubbled. We've never seen something this big and pervasive. And this bubble needs to rebalance, reset, deleverage. It's that simple. And if we don't, it's going to be worse. This is addiction. It's the classic principle. I go back and, time and time again say, this is addiction. This is like somebody that keeps drinking more or smoking more, whatever they do, to not face reality in life. And then it gets progressively worse and they keep going every way possible. And then they finally collapse and hit bottom. And then they go to detox or they die. And I mean, this is, again, I've never seen anything like this in modern history. I can't compare it. So what did we do? All central banks stepped up, stimulated extremely aggressively in early 2009, and that continued across the board into 2013. Now, in early 2013, Japan, who's been stalling the longest, went off the reservation and tripled their quantitative easing, tripled the drug. That's when gold fell, because gold realized finally that no matter how much stimulus, we still weren't going to have inflation. That was the breaking point for gold when it broke through 1530, as we warned, and then went down to 1,050. It's still going to go down more because we're still playing the stimulus game. Now, the U.S. finally got sober and started to taper. Now, they didn't stop buying Treasury bonds and other bonds and stuff and assets. They simply just replaced the ones that were expiring. So they kind of flattened out their balance sheet in quantitative easing. Well, as they started to do that, again, Japan had already accelerated. Europe steps in late 2014, early 2015, and they start accelerating quantitative easing after taking a break like the U.S. So they've been playing tag team ever since. The point is we've had non-stop stimulus around the world, quantitative easing since early 2009. Balance sheets are now up to $22 trillion globally from a few trillion, originally. Japan now has created cumulative balance sheet and quantitative easing, 97% of their GDP, 97%. You know how much stimulus that is? Europe, 42%, US, 22%. We're the best house in a bad neighborhood. But now, of course, that doesn't work at some point. You hit the diminishing returns, even with negative interest rates in countries like Japan and Germany and most of the Eurozone. Negative rates. Money is not only free, adjusted for inflation, it costs you, it's negative. So that didn't have as much effect as any stimulus would. Any drug, it takes more and more and more to get less and less effect. That is the principle of addiction. Well, now what happened? Trump comes up and says, okay, well, here's what we'll do. We'll cut taxes. And the tax cuts are primarily to businesses and people who own businesses. That's the top 0.11% largely. Of course, everybody got a little crumb, everyday people, maybe got a couple $100 here, maybe $1,000 here, there. But this tax cut went primarily to businesses and business owners, right when corporate profits as a percentage of GDP have been the highest in all of modern history, measured history. Do companies need tax cuts when, with free money, they're primarily using it to buy back their own stocks and to, create mergers and acquisitions to rearrange the pie? All things to, make more out of a slow-growing or stagnant pie? They're not making major investments in new capacity. Now, with these new profits, of course, some companies did it first, and some are trying, I think, almost to thank Trump for this. But this is not going to happen. Capacity utilization just a year or so ago before this was 75%. Now it's closer to 79%. 80 to 85 is normal, and 90% would mean, wow, they're really tight and we really need more capacity. Companies don't really need more capacity. Why would they invest these windfalls from tax savings into more capacity, which would only raise their overheads and make them less profitable? No, buying back their own stock makes them instantly more profitable with no pain, until the stock market crashes and their shareholders turn around and say to management, why did you take all the money, all our excess profits, all the cash we had, and speculate on our own stocks at the top of a bubble? And then when it crashes and we're in a real crisis and need that money to survive and be the survival of the fittest and win this war and gain market share, we don't have it because you speculated away to increase your earnings per share and your stock options and stuff. But now, of course, the real point today, Trump is so desperate. Republicans, of course, are not looking good coming into the 2018 elections. Oh, that wasn't enough. The biggest tax cut since Reagan, that wasn't enough. So he's going to come up, and God knows with what, another tax cut plan to add to this one before the elections. This is political. It is stupid. It's ignorant. It's arrogant. This will not stand. If I were you, I would be getting as defensive as I ever have in my life, in my business, and in my investments, especially over the next couple of months. We have two danger periods I'm looking at through cycles and other just patterns I'm looking at. One is that between, say, around late August and October, November, we finally do see this bubble burst, a fifth blow-off wave since the Trump rally. And we did tell people to get back. We said, yeah, we're in for rally now. You cannot argue with free money from tax cuts to corporations. That is going to boost earnings and stocks, no matter how toxic and wrong it is long term. So we're in this final blow-off rally. It could peak by late August, and we see that first crash, 42% give or take in 2.5 months. And that's from the average of the last 7 great stock bubbles of the last century. So this has happened pretty much every time. And then we know this bubble's over. If it doesn't happen then we continue to monitor the patterns. But again, it gets harder and harder to gain because all of this stimulus has less and less impact. You can only push on a string so hard. Workforce growth, as we've shown in many newsletters in the last year or so, is flat to down for years to come and really growing flat to only 0.2% for decades. Productivity's fallen from 3 to 4% down to 0.5%, and it's going to be 0 as the baby boomers continue to age. Old people don't contribute to productivity, they take away. Old people don't earn and produce more, they retire at some point, and then on top of that, they die. Old people buy less and less real estate, and then they die and they sell. That's what we're heading for. You cannot create 3 to 4% growth with endless stimulus without basically getting toxic, overdoing it, and then collapsing and going into a horrible detox. And that's what a depression is. That's what a massive debt leveraging is. It's a financial economic detox, period. And we're going to see the largest one in history in the next 2 to 5 years. I am absolutely certain of this.